Nnamdi, I wrote a list of the music, but you can, if any you have, you can just, intersperse with music, and I trust your...
Yeah. This is a
Yeah.
We have in the studio live in the studio today as a serious African man, original His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, Vice President of Ghana. VP Mahama is here in LA as part of the promotional tour of his recently published book, My First Coup D'etat, and other true stories from the lost decades of Africa. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Nnamdi. Thanks, brother. Good to be here.
So, Mr. VP, I understand that you are the only sitting vice president in Africa to have published a book. Congratulations.
Thanks, Nnamdi.
Well done. Tell us about your new book and what inspired you to write it.
Well, the book is a memoir, and it chronicles my life from about when I was 7 years old and growing up, and into young adulthood as a young man in school, secondary school, in university. And it chronicles a period of time in Africa that I generally refer to as the lost decades. That is a period from about the mid-1960s till about the mid-1980s. This was a period of economic deterioration for Africa, and really actually a lot of hardship. But I mean, there were young people like us growing up, and that is the age that we lived, and not much has been written about it. And so following the death of my father in 2001, I was very close to him. I continued to reflect on the relationship I had with him and realize how unique my upbringing was, but at the same time how universal it was for young people who grew up in that age. And so I thought that I should contribute to the documentation of the period and really come out with this book to reflect, that part of our history.
The lost decades, you read about something that a lot of people don't give much weight to, and that is the power and influence of music and musicians during that time period. I remember reading something about Michael Jackson being a big influence on you. Can you give us a little bit of that section?
Yeah, Nnamdi, thank you. That is in a chapter called Teenagers in Tamale.
And Tamale, Ghana.
Yeah, that's right. It was a period when I was in secondary school and growing up. Let me just give you a little excerpt. I wore a huge afro, bell-bottom trousers, and heavy platform shoes. It was the early 70s, and that was the definition of cool. Black American culture had taken West Africa by storm. More accurately, there seemed to be a cultural exchange taking place between Black America and West Africa, especially Ghana. Black Americans had traded in their blue jeans, suits, and shirt sleeves for batiks, tie-dyes, and dashikis sewn from the popular Ghanaian cloth called Angelina. Meanwhile, we in Ghana had taken to wearing hipsters, miniskirts, and polyester shirts that were left unbuttoned straight down to the navel. As funky as the fashion was, it was merely a byproduct, the music, which was the main event. Jackson 5 mania was spreading through the continent like an infectious disease. Those brothers were our idols. We memorized their songs, we copied their dance moves, and tried to dress like them. Everybody I knew wanted to be like Michael Jackson, and I was no exception. As luck would have it, I had more in common with Michael than any of those boys who purposely spoke in awkwardly high voices or stood in front of the mirror every morning and diligently picked their afros. For starters, we were almost the same age. Michael was only 3 months older than me to the day. His birth date was August 29, 1958, and mine was November 29, 1958. To children, small coincidences like that hold a great deal of weight and meaning.
90.7 FM, our special guest, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, current Vice President of Ghana.
Things could be better.
I remember the story.
It's some understanding right now. Right now.
Oh, yeah.
Right now.
Yeah, we come right in.
Right now. Let's just groove.
Yeah, you guys live, but you need to be together. Be my friend. I'll be
yours forever.
All we need. Let's finish the show.
I understand you're going to DJ for us.
Right now.
Oh, wow.
Right now. Right now. Radio Afrodicia, classic from Osibisa right now. Your Excellency, this one must have touched you because growing up in Nigeria, I remember this track right now by Osibisa.
Yeah.
Music never dies, man. Now, Mr. Vice President.
Just call me John. Nnamdi.
Thank you. You write also about the influence the musicians had, not only on culture but on politics too, especially during the time when country after country in Africa was being terrorized by dictators.
Yeah, it was a period of coup d'etats from about the late 60s into the early 80s. Almost every African country had come under military dictatorship. There were human rights abuses, there were economic hardships, our country's economies were stagnating or shrinking, and life was generally hard. And our only form of escape was our music. And this saw the rise of a new crop of musicians who were raging against the establishment using their music. It was impossible to come out directly in demonstrations and things, and so our musicians spoke with their music. And so we have the Fela Anikulapo Kutis, we have the Hugh Masekelas, you know, writing music against apartheid. We had the Bob Marleys, we had the Maria Makibas, you know, all of them using their music as an instrument for the liberation of the people. These people were bold and they took a stand with their music. And we not only enjoyed their music, but we supported them.
Welcome to Los Angeles. Your first time in the city?
Yeah, my first time.
You must love the city.
Yeah, I do. I've been to America so many times, but it's always on the East Coast. This is my first time on the West Coast. Well, it's lovely.
We call LA Love Africa.
Yeah, sure. It's just like home, you know.
Well, talking about your book, My First Coup D'etat, you want to read an excerpt from...
I'm going to read another excerpt from Teenagers in Tamale, and it continues about music and the influence music had. If the 1960s was a season of politics, then the 1970s was a season of song. The sounds of Motown and Stax Records filled the airwaves in Ghana, with James Brown and the Jackson 5 and Otis Redding. The passion that was once roused by our political leaders was now being channeled into music. The icons of the previous era had all been executed, assassinated, exiled, imprisoned, or otherwise silenced. There was no Patrice Lumumba. There was no Sylvanus Olympio. There was no Kwame Nkrumah. There was no Tafawa Balewa. There was no Nelson Mandela. There was no Martin Luther King Jr. There was no Malcolm X. And there was no Amilcar Cabral. There was only us, and there was music. Fela Anikulapo Kuti was gaining international recognition for his significant contributions to the sound that would forever be known as Afrobeat. There were many other sounds as well. There was the Bumbaya and Hejole, and the sound of the Uhuru Dance Band. A lot of bands used to tour throughout Ghana, traveling from town to town. Whenever one of the bands like Gerald Dupino and the Heartbeats was coming into town, the whole town would be agog. In 1971, there was the concert of all concerts, the Soul to Soul Music Festival, which was staged on March 6th as a celebration of Ghana's 14th independence anniversary. It was held in Accra at the Black Star Square, which is now called the Independence Square, and it was 14 hours long, ending at dawn. A number of Americans came to perform, like Wilson Pickett, Ike and Tina Turner, the Staple Singers, Santana, and Roberta Flack. For months before and for months afterwards, Soul to Soul was the talk of the nation. Every town attempted their own mini replica of Soul to Soul, inviting multiple bands, trying to pack the venues and keep the show going until the crowd was knackered. All the bands that came to perform in Tamale usually performed at a place called the Legion Village. Not many kids our age could afford the gate fee, but Dad would always give us money if we needed it, enough for us to be able to get in and buy drinks. My older brothers drank beer, but Adam and I stuck to water and soda, as their soft drinks as they are commonly referred to elsewhere. The kids in Tamale flocked to our house because there were so many of us. It was like a ready-made community. Also, they knew that we would always end up taking our closest friends along with us to whatever performance or event we were attending, even if it meant having to pay for them as well. This alone guaranteed that half of the town kids were always hanging around at our house hoping to be chosen. Discos were also sprouting up all over the place. When there weren't any bands coming to town on Friday and Saturdays, my brothers and I would go to disco. The most popular one in Tamale was called The Right Spot. The music would be so loud that you could feel the vibration of the beat in your chest cavity. Alfred, Adam, and Peter and I would dance, lifting and kicking those clunky platform shoes to perform all the kinds of moves we had seen on Soul Train. We enjoyed showing off to one another and just being silly and generally having a good time. My interest in the opposite sex was just developing. So one of the highlights of going out to these performances and discos was the prospect of seeing a pretty girl. I had not graduated to the level of meeting them or even having a conversation with them, unlike Peter, my brother. I admired his confidence and the sure stride that he would use to walk up to a girl he liked and wanted to start a conversation with. He had his way of standing and looking at the girl with a slight grin and his eyes like flags lowered to half-mast. When Peter did that, any girl he was talking to would immediately melt. She would giggle foolishly and look away, pretending to be shy, but all the while making cat-and-mouse small talk with him. I was at a stage in my development where I could only stop and look. That's all I was physically capable of doing. If a girl I thought was pretty came to talk to me, I would find myself unable to speak, or the words that would manage to come out of my mouth would sound silly and juvenile, and I'll immediately regret having said them.
90.7 FM. That was so good.